How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Daf 64 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, Daf 64 is awesome. We start the sixth parak of Masechta Menachos. How exciting is that? We are making strides here in Masechta Menachos. The exciting thing is that there are about 45 pages left in the Masechta, and I hope I did the math right, and about 6 prakim, which means that we should start completing prakim on a faster pace, which is nice. It might help us feel like momentum and movement, which is really, really exciting. Today we start the parak Rabbi Shmuel, which talks about the ha-omer. Of course, Pesach is right around the corner, and we are learning about the korbin ha-omer in this parak. I guess, as you can hear, I should probably give you an update about my voice. I think even though I'm coughing, I actually do think my voice is strengthening, which is marvelous news. I managed to not lose it, at least so far. Wow, that is a huge help, because once it's lost, it takes a week to get back, and that is a tough week. So thankfully, I hope we're on the mends, which would be incredible. Friends, on today's daf, we discuss harvesting barley for the korbin ha-omer. How much barley, how many people, etc. In my opinion, relatively interesting. Doing melachah for a choleh on Shabbis, interesting. That comes up along the way. This sugya is introduced. There's some interesting stuff there, interesting halachas in the Mishnah Berurah that we will discuss briefly. And where to bring the ha-omer barley from, also some interesting things there. Very interesting daf, all in all, in my opinion. It's not the shortest daf, also because we have basically half of Samach Gimel and Beis to do, but there are some interesting topics. It feels kind of like a normal daf of Gemara, which is really, really nice. We haven't had so many of those in the past 7 months. So, friends, let's jump into Daf Samach Daled of Masechta Menachos. Friends, beginning on Daf Samach Gimel Amid Beis at the new parak, at the new Mishnah of the new parak, Rabbi Shmuel, Mrs. Rabbi Shmuel, ha-omer haya ba b'Shabbis. Maybe I should speak a little softly. So, my apologies for the soft speaking. If you're sleeping, don't fall asleep. Maybe blast my softness. Okay, I said if you're driving, don't fall asleep. Not if you're sleeping, don't fall asleep. If you're sleeping, listen when you wake up. Rabbi Shmuel says, Rabbi Shmuel, ha-omer ayabah b'Shabbos mishalosh sayin uvachol mechomesh v'chacham omer echad Shabbos v'echad chol b'mishalosh. Achlekes Rabbi Shmuel and the chachamim about how much barley to harvest for the ha-omer. Friends, how much flour? Okay, first of all, let's be clear. The minchas ha-omer is barley. It, I believe, is one of 2 barley menachos, the other one being a minchas knos, a minchas sota. Now, the minchas ha-omer, friends, how much flour was it? An asiris ha'efa, 1/10 of an ephah. Now, Rabbi Shmuel says that on Shabbos, how much barley would be harvested for this asiris ha'efa, for this 1/10 of an ephah? 3 sa'as of barley was harvested, and from those 3 sa'as of barley, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour was extracted. How much are 3 sa'as? 1 ephah. So basically, you would harvest an ephah's worth of barley, and from a full ephah of barley, you would be able to extract 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour. As we learned about on the longest daf ever of Babble on Talmud, a isaron is 43.2 eggs, and that is 1/10 of an ephah, which means that an ephah is 432 eggs worth. Now, 3 sa'a are also 432 eggs worth. I think I can do the math. I tried to do the math. I tried to see if I remember the math yesterday. I failed miserably, but I looked it up. Let's see if I remember. It's 6 eggs in a log. It's 4 logs in a kav, which means that it's 24 eggs in a kav, and it's 6 kav in a. It is 6 kav in a sa'a. Does that make sense? So if we do 20, yeah, that probably makes sense. What's 24 times 6? What's 24 times 6? I think that's probably it. Let's see. Where's my calculator? So calculator, 24 times 6, times 3 is 432, exactly. So it's 6 beitzim, 6 eggs in a log, 4 logs in a kav, 6 kavs in a sa'ah, 3 sa'ah in an ephah. So when we say 3 sa'ahs, that's essentially an ephah. And we are extracting from that an isarun, a tenth of an ephah of flour. So givaldik. So be'etzim, we harvest an ephah of barley, and from the ephah we grind it up and we extract a tenth of that as fine flour. Now, it says Rabbi Shmuel, that is on Shabbos. During the week, however, we harvest 5 sa'ahs of barley, which is significantly more. It's 2/3 more the amount of barley. And from 5 sa'ah of barley, we extract that isaron of flour, which is easier to do because there's a lot more flour to select from. But if you want to get fine flour from 5 sa'ah of barley, it's much easier to just kind of pick out the best of the best to get that isaron. If it's 3 sa'ah, you have to work a bit harder in the sifting, in the sifting, maybe you could say sifting, in the sifting of it, in order to extract that better flour from 3 sa'ah. Now the Chachamim say, so again, Rabbi Shmuel, says Rabbi Shmuel, oh interesting, Rabbi Shmuel, Omer, okay, Rabbi Shmuel, Omer hayaba, b'Shabbos mishalosh sayin, that on Shabbos, 3 sa'ah would be harvested for the omer, from which an isaron of solas was extracted. V'chol, during the week, however, mechamesh, there would be 5 sa'ah harvested, from which that isaron of solas was extracted. Whereas the Chacham say it's always 3 sa'ah. Whether Shabbos, whether during the week, we're always talking about 3 sa'ah of barley. I'm sorry. Echad b'chol mishalosh hayaba. Rabbi Chanina Skan hakianim ha-omer says Rabbi Chanina Skan hakianim b'Shabbos niktzar b'yachud of magal echad of kupa achas v'chol b'shalosh kupas v'shalosh magalos v'chacham omim echad Shabbos v'echad chol b'shalosh kupas v'shalosh magalos. Now there is a machlokas between Rabbi Chanina Skan hakianim and the Chachamim in terms of, okay, so now that we've seen how much barley is harvested, how many people harvest it, with how many sickles, and the barley is put into how many baskets. So, Rabbi Chanina Skan hakianim says that on Shabbos, there is but one fellow who harvests the barley with 1 sickle into 1 basket on Shabbos. During the week, however, there would be a team of 3 people with 3 sickles, putting the barley into 3 baskets. The Chachamim say that similarly to the Reisha, where they were consistent between Shabbos and the weekday, here as well they are consistent and say that it is 3 people with 3 sickles into 3 baskets. And if we combine that with the Reisha, it's 3 sa'ah harvested by 3 people with 3 sickles and put into 3 baskets. And this is whether during the week or whether on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Bishtabu Rabbanon, Kasabri Isaron, Muvchor, Bishlosha, Soyin, Osi, Veloshna, B'chov, Veloshna, B'Shabbos. Says the Gemara, I understand the sheet of the Chacham. What are the Chacham saying, Batson? What they're saying is, 3 sa'ah is what's necessary to extract the amount of flour that we are looking for an isaron of solas. And so, when it comes to the omer, you need an isaron of solas. 3 sa'ah of barley will get you 1 isaron of solas. So you harvest 3 sa'ah of barley. Makes no difference whether it's Shabbos during the week, right? Anyways, clearly the omer is doche Shabbos. Anyways, you could harvest the barley anyways on Shabbos. So, harvest whatever you need. And how much you need? 3 sa'ah. That's whether during the week. That is on Shabbos. It's always going to be the same. Harvesting the omer is docha Shabbos, and just like during the week, you harvest 3 sa'ah because that's what's required. On Shabbos also, you harvest 3 sa'ah because that's what's required. I get the opinion of the Chacham. It's consistent. It's always the same, whether during the week, whether on Shabbos. Again, B'Shlomo Rabbanon, Kasavri Isaron Muvchor B'Shlosha Sa'in Asi, that to get a proper Isaron of fine flour for the omer, you need 3 sa'ah of barley. Veloshna b'chol, veloshna b'Shabbos. It doesn't matter if we're talking about during the weekday. It doesn't matter if we're talking about on Shabbos. This is what you're going to harvest 3 sa'as. El Rabbi Shmuel, but I don't understand Rabbi Shmuel's shita. My kasavar, what does he hold? I don't get it. Ikasavar isarun muvcher lo asi al michamesh. If Rabbi Shmuel says, look, in order to get an isarun of fine flour of the quality that we're seeking, you need 5 sa'ah of barley, and only from 5 sa'ah of barley will there be enough barley to be able to choose from to get the finest flour that we are searching for. Well, then afilu b'Shabbos nami. Well, if you need 5 sa'ah, so you need 5 sa'ah. I don't understand why it would be helpful to harvest only 3 sa'ah on Shabbos if you need 5. Mishalos asi, and if you can get the results that are necessary from just 3 sa'ah, afilu b'chol nami. Well, then during the week, why are you harvesting 5 when all you need is 3? So I don't get it. I get the chachamim; they're consistent. You need 3, and you always harvest 3. According to Rabbi Shmuel, why the distinction between 3 and 5? If you need 5, it should always be 5. If you need 3, it should always be 3. Omar Rove says Rove kasova Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel holds isarin muvcher below tircha asi michamish betircha asi mishalish. Here is the thing. You can get an isaron of soles from 3 sa'ah. You can. It will require more effort. It will require more work. I think my understanding is that the quality of the soles won't quite be right. Look, when you have 5 sa'ah, there's just so much flour to be choosing from. You can mamish get the cream of the crop. So when you have 5 sa'ah, mamash, that's a chitov. Kilu, it's easier to just extract the best of the best, and the quality will be top notch. With 3 sa'ah, it will require more effort. To get a full isaron of fine flour from 3 sa'ah, it's going to require more work in sifting and processing. And also, even though the end result isn't quite going to be mamish the cream of the crop, it'll be soles, it'll be fine flour, it won't be kemach, it'll be soles, but it'll require more effort, and it won't be the cream of the crop. So therefore, b'chol ma'isinon mechamish. So therefore, during the week, so we harvest more. We harvest 5 sa'ah of barley. De'achi shvicha milsa, because this is the better. This is preferred in terms of quality and experience of preparing the ha-omer. 5 is better. However, b'Shabbos there are also other considerations in terms of doing melachah on Shabbos. We are conscious of that. Mutav sheyarbe b'melacha achas beharkoda ve'al yarbe b'melachos harbe. Rabbi Shmuel says, look, when it comes to Shabbos, we also though have to take into consideration that it is Shabbos, and lo saisa kol melacha. We don't do melacha on Shabbos, and therefore part of the cheshbon is, look, if we harvest an additional 2 sa'ah of barley, so yeah, we'll have 5 sa'ah to work with. It'll be easier to work with, and we'll be able to extract a finer flour. But we'll be doing more melachas. 2 more sa'ah need to be harvested, need to be threshed, need to be ground. All sorts of things need to be done to an extra 2 sa'ah of barley. Whereas if we harvest just 3 sa'ah of barley, so you'll have to invest more. There'll be more sifting that's going to have to happen. But so we're increasing 1 melacha versus increasing lots of melachas. So Rabbi Shmuel says, even though it would be easier and even preferred, ideally, to work with 5 sa'ah in terms of that preference versus how much melacha do we want? Do we want to be limiting the amount of melacha that we're doing on Shabbos? Says Rabbi Shmuel that preference would go to limiting the melacha, and therefore better to work with, right? The halacha is, according to Rabbi Shmuel, to work with 3 sa'ah on Shabbos as opposed to 5 sa'ah on Shabbos. Okay. Omar Rabba says Rabba. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to give 3 scenarios where the Gemara will suggest that Rabbi Shmuel is similar to another Tana. Rabbi Shmuel, who is saying that we want to limit the scope of melachah on Shabbos is similar to another Tana. So starting with Rabbi says Rabbi Shmuel Benosha Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Amud Rechad. Very exciting. We are now talking about Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shmuel Benosha Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Great. Aside from the fact that they both have the name Rabbi Shmuel Benosha Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is a mouthful, but we have no choice other than to say it since we need to distinguish between the two Rabbi Shmuels. Now, so Amar Rabbi Shmuel Benosha Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, that's a mouthful. Amru Davar Echad, they say the Zel Bazach, they say the same thing. The Sani that we learned in the Brisa, Arba Osir, Pesach. Pesach's coming up, 2.5 weeks or so. Arbaya Osir Shecholiyos b'Shabbos, if Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos. Now, of course, what happens on Erev Pesach? Korbin Pesach, right? God willing, we will be offering Korbin Pesach. What day? Let's see. First day of Passover 2026 is on. Wait, no, give me English. I've been living in Israel half my life, but I need English search results. Evening of Wednesday, so that means Thursday. So Wednesday, God willing, Wednesday, April 1st, 14th of Nisan, 2026, Tufshin Pei, I don't know, Vav? I think. So Wednesday, April 1st, be there or be square. I'll see y'all in the Beis HaMikdash. Remember, sheep or a goat, first year. I think it's a female sheep or a goat. Well, we'll have to check that up. But yeah. Sell the base, always sell the base. I don't know. But yeah, I look forward to eating the Korbin Pesach. Maybe we can have a Babble on Talmud Chabura. That would be nice. So this year the 14th falls out on a Wednesday. So if the 14th of Nisan falls out on a Sabbath, so when you're offering the Korbin Pesach and taking out the Emurim, so Mafshed es Pesach Ara Chozeh. So take out the so you'll cut the Korbin Pesach until the chest. Just meaning the point is, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Says Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, do the minimum. Make the minimum, cut the minimum amount of the animal, so you could take out whatever you need to take out from the inside, and that's it. Don't incise. Don't cut more than you need to. It is Shabbos after all. Ad sheyavshit es kulo. Whereas the Chacham say, no, do whatever you need to do. Yes, technically you can cut a little bit less and pull out from the inside of the body whatever you need to pull out of there. But the Chacham said, don't worry, just do whatever you need to do. You can cut more and, cut the animal open properly and take out whatever you need to take out. Now, says the Gemara, Milo Amr Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Hasam, is Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka not saying like Rabbi Shmuel says, which is choleh de efshir lo tarchinon. What's Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka saying? That, well, if we can do less melachah on Shabbos, we should do less melachah. If all we need to technically do is slit till the chest, and that's it. So Achanami, Rabbi Shmuel says the same thing here on Shabbos when it comes to the barley. Came the efshir lo tarchinon, since it is possible to process an isaron of flour from 3 sa'ah, we are not going to harvest 5 sa'ah. Mimai. Now the Gemara questions why they must be the same opinion. Maybe there are different opinions. Maybe they don't agree. And this is essentially going to be the template for the next 2 examples as well. We'll suggest that Reb Yishmael holds like a certain Tana, and we'll explain why they don't necessarily agree. Look, Rabbi Shmuel says over here that on Shabbos you only harvest 3 sa'ah of barley, ela dileka bizyin kachin, because over here by the barley there's no disgrace, there's no inappropriate handling of korban or of korbanis. Aval hasam dika bizyin kachim ema lach kirabanan svirale. However, when it comes to the korbin Pesach, when it comes to the korbin Pesach on Shabbos, that if you cut only to the chest and then you simply leave the animal, let's take it from the other perspective. According to the Chachamim, you cut the animal open properly, you take out whatever you need to take out from the animal, and it looks like an animal that's been butchered, that's been processed properly. According to Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, who slits only to the chest, pulls out whatever you need to. It's you have an animal just kind of sitting there, not properly processed, just kind of cut open and bloody. So it's not a beautiful sight to look at when it comes to korbanos. So therefore, Rabbi Shmuel, who says that you only harvest 3 sah of barley, he might, however, agree with the Chachamim by the Korbin Pesach to go the whole way and properly cut open the animal so that when you look at the animal, it looks like an animal that's been properly processed and butchered rather than an animal that is a mess. So again, maybe Rabbi Shmuel would hold like the Rabbanan. Inami. Also from another perspective, who says that Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka would agree with Rabbi Shmuel? Inami ad kan le'kamer Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka ahasam. Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says over there that you just cut the minimum and take out the insides. Elad is avid leit tzorich gavoa, because you're doing the mitzvah that you need to do. You're cutting it open, you're taking out whatever you need to do. You've done, by doing less, you've done the mitzvah 100%. You didn't compromise at all. And therefore, if you're able to cut less and still take out and remove whatever you need to remove, then amazing. However, you don't need to be mechal Shabbos more than just to cut to the chest. Now, however, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka would say here by the barley that look, even Rabbi Shmuel admits that 5 sah is better. 3 sah is not as good. It's good, but not as good as 5. But however, when it comes to the 3 sah of barley, where the Isarun of Solis is going to be less good than 5 sah of barley, and anyways, you have to be Mechalel Shabbos to harvest it. So Ema Karbonet Sfirle, maybe, right, meaning in order to do it properly, you're gonna have to, be Mechal Shabbos more. So he would agree with the Chachamim, that meaning the Chachamim say 3 sah, right? But the point being, the Chachamim say that, if the Chachamim felt that you needed 5 sah, they would say 5 sah during the week or on Shabbos. Meaning the point is the Chachamim don't distinguish between Shabbos and the weekday. They say if the mitzvah is that, right, if the bringing the ha-omer is docha Shabbos, harvesting the ha-omer is docha Shabbos, so then it's docha Shabbos 100%, however much you need. Now they happen to say that all you need is 3 sah, so 3 sah. However, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka could argue that since, according to Rabbi Shmuel, 5 sah is better than 3 sah, so Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka would say that if 5 sah is better, then you should be doing 5 sah on Shabbos as well, because that is better. You should do the mitzvah as best as can. So therefore, when it comes to the Korbin Pesach, when all you really need to do is slit the animal until the chest, and you could take out whatever you need to take out, and everything is done as good as if you slit the whole way, so then there's no need to slit the whole way. But when it comes to the ha-omer, I could argue that Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka would say that if 5 is better, then you should really be doing 5. Rabba says, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Chanina skana kehanim, Amud Avar Echad. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim say the zel bazach, the same thing, the snan that we learn in our Mishnah. Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim, ha-omer said Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim in our Mishnah, b'Shabbos niktzor b'yochid b'magol echad uv'kupa achas uv'chol b'shalosh kupas v'shalosh magalos v'chachom omim echad Shabbos v'echad chol b'shalosh kupas v'shalosh magalos. So we saw in our Mishnah the machlokes between Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim and the Chachamim, which is that Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim makes a distinction between Shabbos and the Vach and the weekday and the week. That on Shabbos the ha-omer is harvested with just one person, one sickle, and 1 basket, whereas and during the week, 3 people, 3 sickles, 3 baskets. The Chacham say it is consistently 3 people, 3 sickles, 3 baskets. Milo, ha-omer Reb Chanina's kana kohanim, ha-omer is the reason not, i.e., Reb Chanina's kana, let's say that Reb Chanina's kana kohanim says that the reason for this distinction is Kevon de Efsher, that since on Shabbos it's possible, or since it's possible to harvest the ha-omer with 1 person, 1 sickle, and 1 basket, lo tarchinon, we won't therefore do more. We won't have a team of 3 when it could be done by just 1 person, and let's limit the scope of melachah on Shabbos. So achanami, so here also by 3 verses 5 sa'as, came the efsher lo tarchinon, since 3 sa'as is possible, we don't do 5 sa'as according to Reb Yishmael. Who says that Reb Yishmael and Reb Chanina's kana kohanim are in cahoots. Dilma adkan lo ha-omer Reb Yishmael ocha. Maybe the reason why Reb Yishmael distinguishes here by the ha-omer 3 verses 5, ela deleka persume milsa, because there's no concern about persume milsa. We'll explain what that is in a second. Aval hosam, but when it comes to a team of 3 versus a team of 1, Deika persume milsa, where there is persume milsa, ema karbon Sruli, maybe Bishmal would agree with the rabbi. Who could tell us what persume nisa? No, not persume nisa, persume milsa. Persume nisa is, of course, something like, for example, the Hanukkah menorah, that everybody should see the miracle. This is not about a miracle. This is about a milsa, about a thing. And that is, we are going to learn on tomorrow's Daf and Daf Samachay, a Mishnah about the Baitusim, that of course is well known. I'm sure many of the Chevra here at Babble and Talmud are aware of this, that the Baitusim, the Tzedukim, Baitusim, they held that Shavuos was always on a Shabbos. Ad mimochras, ha-Shabbos, ha-Shvius, tisbu chamishim yom. That, right? I think that is the pasuk that they go based on. That basically they say mimochras ha-Shabbos. That mimochras ha-Shabbos means Sunday. That Shavuos is always on a Sunday, and therefore the ha-omer, which is 7 weeks prior, is always on a Sunday as well, and therefore the ha-omer is harvested on a Sunday, and they say that would be like that every single year. The ha-omer is always harvested. Mimachos HaShabbos is always harvested on a Sunday. However, the Prushim, the rabbinic Jews, like we are, that we hold the Torah Shabbal Peh, that we know that the Torah Shabbal Peh means basically the day after the first day of Yom Tov. The second day of Pesach is when the korbin ha-omer was offered. And if that falls out on Shabbos, so then we harvest it even on Shabbos. Of course, the Baitusim would say being Mechal Shabbos. But to make their point, the Chacham said that we should have a team of not just one person. One person can technically do it, but we want to have a team of 3 to make a whole to-do about it. We're going to learn about this tomorrow, in the Mishnah tomorrow, but we davka want to make a whole spectacle out of it, a whole event out of it, to have a team of people harvesting the barley for the ha-omer. And therefore, Rabbi Shmuel says, look, I agree with the Chachamim that we persume milsa. We want to have a team, right? Yeah, technically all you need is one person, but there's another concern here, that we want to make a point that harvesting the ha-omer is docha Shabbos, and therefore Rabbi Shmuel would say, I agree that when it comes to making the point and sticking it to the Baitusim, that we should have a team of 3. So again, Mimai Dilma Adkan Lo Ka'omer Rabbi Shmuel Acha. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Shmuel says only harvest 3 verses 5 is because is Deika. Where am I? Because when it comes to 3 verses 5, there isn't any question about presume milsa. It's a matter of how much barley do you technically need. Aval hosam, but the team of 1 versus a team of 3, the ika presume milsa, that a team of 3 is more of an event, is more of a spectacle. It makes more of a splash, and it makes more of a point that we are harvesting the ha-omer on Shabbos. So Eima Krabon and Sruli, maybe Rabbi Shmuel would agree with the Chachamim that you should have the team of 3, even though you could technically have 1. Inami, Alternatively, Arkan lo ka'am Reb Chanina's kana kohanim awesome. Reb Chanina's kana kohanim says over there a team of 1 rather than 3. De'i bechad I bishlosha tzorich gavoa misavid kilchaso. Because at the end of the day, Reb Chanina Skana Kohanim says, look, yeah, I know that there's this concept of making a splash, but at the end of the day, with a team of 1, the ha-omer will be harvested perfectly. We're not compromising in terms of the result of the ha-omer. By using a team of 1, there is no compromise whatsoever. But like we said earlier, that according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says that 5 is ideal, so then by harvesting 3, the result is less ideal. So tzorich gavoa, that Rabbi Chanina's kana kohanim could agree with the Chachamim that we should be consistent between the week and on Shabbos, and if 5 is better, then even 5 should be offered on Shabbos as well. Elo Omer of Ashi. So again, so far we have tried to say that Rabbi Shmuel is like Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. We've tried to say that Rabbi Shmuel is like Reb Chanina's kana kohanim. Both cases, the Gemara pushed back and says that maybe they don't agree. And final case, where they also ultimately won't agree, El Omer Rav Ashi, rather says Rav Ashi, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Amud Av Echad, that Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yossi are in cahoots. This nan that we learned in the Mishnah in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, ben Shanir ba'olil, uben Shalonir ba'olil. Of course, back in the day, the Kiddush HaChodesh would be Bira'iyah. People would look up in the sky and they'd say, oh, what is that I see? That is a new moon. It is the moled of the new month, and they go to Yerushalayim and they report, they testify, Eidus HaChodesh, they testify that they saw the new moon, and then Bezdin announces that Mikudosh, that it is a new month. Now, what if the new moon was spotted on Shabbos? Are you Machal Shabbos to travel to Yerushalayim in order to testify about the new moon? Would you do that on Shabbos? So the Mishnah, Masechta Rosh Hashanah, says that whether the moon was clearly seen in the sky, what's the difference if it's clearly seen in the sky? Well, if it's clearly seen in the sky, you're probably not the only one who saw it, right? You outside of Yerushalayim who's going to have to travel to Yerushalayim, if it's a clear sky, you're probably not. You could assume that you're not the only one who saw it. In Yerushalayim, they probably also saw it. You don't really need to travel. But the Mishnah says, whether it's a clear sky and you clearly saw it, and therefore anybody else could have also seen it, or whether it was a trickier spotting, maybe it was a cloudy day or whatever it might be, it was more of a trickier sight, and maybe you are the only ones who saw it. Either way, travel to Yerushalayim and testify about what you saw. Bein shenir ba'alul, bein shalonir ba'alul, whether the moon was seen clearly or whether it was seen more complexly. Mechal and all of Es Shabbos, you could be Mechal Shabbos to travel to Yerushalayim, to travel to Bezdin in order to testify about ha-omer you saw. Rabbi Yossi, ha-omer says, Rabbi Yossi, im nira ba'alil, en Mechal and all of Es Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says, look, if it's clear in the sky, if it's a clear sky and it's obvious to all that there's a new moon, save the trip. It's Shabbos. You don't have to be Mechal Shabbos in order to testify about something that everybody else also saw, including in Yerushalayim. They also saw that it's a new moon. You don't need to testify. You don't need to be Mechal Shabbos to go and testify. So now, Milo Amr Rabbi Yossi Hosam came to Efshelo Tarchinon. So new. We see that Rabbi Yossi is saying that no need to do extra tircha Shabbos. That is not necessary. It's not necessary to go and testify about a new moon that's so clear that everybody else saw it as well. So Achanami here as well came the Efshel Tarchinon, since you could offer the Isaron with 3 sa'ah, 5 sa'ah is unnecessary. Mimai, how come they are necessarily in cahoots? Dilma adkan lo ka'am Rabbi Shmuel acha. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Shmuel says by the ha-omer is el de leka nimtses ata machshilon de asid lavo. Abal hosem de nimtses ata machshilon de asid lavo ema krabon and svirle. You see, when it comes to the testifying about the moon, it's a little bit of a slippery slope. There's a bit of a concern. The concern is that if already we're making the distinction and we're saying, if you see the moon, the new moon on Shabbos, then you have to ask yourself. You have to say, is this obvious? Is this clear? Am I the only one who saw this? Maybe everybody saw it. If everybody saw it, then I don't go. If I probably am the only one who saw it, then I should go. Once already you're making cheshbonis, you know what's going to end up happening? People are going to see the new moon. Happens to be they're the only ones who saw it. But they're going to say, I think probably other people saw it. And they're not going to go. And then the new moon is not going to be new mooned on time. And therefore, so Rabbi Shmuel says, look, when it comes to the new moon, I would agree with the Chachamim that ben shnir ba'alul, ben shlo nir shelo ba'alul, right? Either way, go to Yerushalayim, because if we start making distinctions, then people are going to make mistakes. However, when it comes to 3 sa'ah versus 5 sa'ah, what's the mistake? What's the worst that can happen? I guess maybe the worst that can happen is they'll harvest 3 instead of 5 during the week, but it's not really a major concern, and therefore Rabbi Shmuel would not necessarily agree with Rabbi Yossi. Again, Ad kan l'kom Rabbi Shmuel says, El deleka nimtzeis atamachshilon la'asid level. That there, when it comes to the ha-omer, 3 verses 5, there isn't actually a concern of causing great harm, long-term harm. But when it comes to testifying about the new moon, where what could end up happening is people won't go to testify, and we won't be Mekadesh the new month on time. Rabbi Shmuel could hold like the rabbis. Inami, alternatively, Ad kan dokam Rabbi Yossi. Also, I could say Rabbi Yossi says over there by Kiddush HaChodesh el teleka tzorich gavoa v'lo nitna Shabbos lidchos. That look, when it comes to the new moon, Rabbi Yossi is saying, look, at the end of the day, if the new moon was so clearly seen in the sky, there's no justification for it. Somebody else, they already know about it in Beis Din. So you're really not doing anything that really needs to be done. And additionally, it's not like there needs to be Chilul Shabbos anyways. Kilu, just stay home and learn. Kilu. Ava, learn the Daf Yomi. But when it comes to the ha-omer, where there is a reason to be harvesting 5 versus 3, meaning if you say that 5 is better than 3, so you should be harvesting 3. And anyways, you have to be Mechal Shabbos anyways. The question isn't, do you harvest or don't you harvest? The question is, how much do you harvest? So you're doing melachah on Shabbos anyways. So harvesting the ha-omer is anyways docha Shabbos. So you may as well do it as ideally as possible and harvest 5 sa'ah rather than 3. But it says Rabbi Yossi, when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh, where you don't just stay home, learn the Daf Yomi. They already know about it in Yerushalayim. So then Rabbi Yossi says, I can't really recommend that they go and travel to Yerushalayim. But when it comes to the ha-omer, Rabbi Yossi could argue that he goes like the Chacham, that you should do the same on Shabbos as you do during the week. Itmar, it was stated, Shochat shtei chatos shel tzibur. If 2 chatos at tzibur were slaughtered, but all you need is 1. So, generally when it comes to chatos at tzibur, what's the example of a chatos at tzibur? Well, Pesach's coming up. On korbin Pesach, on Pesach, not the korbin Pesach, but on Pesach, on the 7 days of Pesach, we offer musafin. We offer korbanos every day, including a seir chatos echad, seir izim echad lechatos. We offer 1 goat as a korbin chatos. So all you need is 1 goat. But this person, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they slaughtered 2. Not exactly sure why. Shochat shtei chatos shel tzibur. If 2 chatos at tzibur were slaughtered, clearly it was by accident, because we're talking about. So we say beinu tzarich ela achas amar Rabba v'tema Reb Ami chayiv ala shniya upater al rishona. So it says Rabba. Some say Reb Ami that you can be chayiv for the second one. Chayiv a korbin chatas kilu. So it was by accident. It wasn't on purpose, but for whatever reason, by accident, he slaughtered 2 chatos hatziburs on Shabbos. So he's going to be chayiv a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one. In terms of the first one, though, of course he's potter. That's the korbin. That's the korbin chatas that needs to be slaughtered. So again, Amar Rabba v'yitem Reb Ami chayiv al hashniya. You're chayiv for having slaughtered the second goat. Ufater al rishona, but potter for the first. V'afilu niskapelo b'shniya. And even if you ended up actually getting kapara from the second one, how so? Well, for example, what if you slaughtered both of these animals? So we're saying you chayiv a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one. But what if the first animal, the blood spills all over the floor, just squirts all over the floor? You can't use the first animal. So we say, oh, okay, well, good thing that we slaughtered the second one. We'll use the second one. Okay, so you use the second one, but you're still going to be chayiv a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one, since at the time that you slaughtered the second one, you didn't know that the first one's blood was going to spill all over the floor. And therefore, you still did something you shouldn't have done. You still have to be in korbin chatas, even though we end up using the second korbin, you still have a korbin chatas for having slaughtered it. And even if the first one turns out to be weak, to be thin, to be shver, shvach, and we don't want to use a shvach korbin, right? Akriveu no lefecha secha yirtzecha o ayisa ponim, or something like that. Ponecha. We don't want to offer shvach korbanos. So even if the first one turns out to be shvach, and we'd prefer the second one, still you're going to be a korbin chav just for having slaughtered the second chatos. Umi Amar Rabba, Nochi, does Rabba really say that you'd be chayiv a korbin chatos when the first one turns out to be shvach? Amar Rabba, but Rabba says, are you lefan of shtei chatos? If a person has 2 korbin chatases, echad shmeina, echad krusha. One is shmeinevdik, gezunt, and the other one is shvach. Shochat, right? One's big and plump, the other one is small and lean. Shochat shmeina v'achakach shochat krusha. If he first slaughters the shmeinevdik one, and then he slaughters the weak one, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv a korbin chatas, because since he slaughtered the good one, the plump one, so there's no need anymore to be slaughtering the shvach one. Krusha v'achakach shmeina potter. But if he first slaughtered the shvach one, the weak one, the thin one, and then the lean one, and then he slaughters the gezunt one, so then he's potter, because you should be slaughtering the gezunt one. Not only that, that even if, right, that lichatchila, if he had first slaughtered an animal, and then it turned out to be shvach, so we'll say milichatchila, go havei shmeina lichatchila v'shchot, go and bring the gezunt one and slaughter that one. So we see that Rabbah says that when the first animal is shvach, you should go and slaughter a gezunt one. And therefore, how could it be that Rabbah was saying that if you slaughter 2 chatases and it turns out the first one was shvach, you'd be chayiv? Over here he's saying pater. Ibais ema sami krusha mikamaisa. Okay. One suggestion is that when we had said initially that you'd be chayiv a korbin chatas when the first animal turned out to be shvach, remove that from the list. Meaning, we had said earlier that if you slaughter 2 korbin chatases, you're going to be chayiv a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one. And that's even if the first one, this blood ended up spilling on the floor, or even if the first one ended up being shvach, you're still going to be chayiv a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one. So we could say just drop the ukimta where the first one ends up being shvach, drop that one, because Rabbah says in that case you would not have to bring a korbin chatas for having slaughtered the second one. Alternatively, Rabbi had said earlier that Rabbah says, some people say it's Reb Ami. You could say that part, at least the part about if the first one turns out to be shvach, you chayiv a korbin chatas for the second one, is not Rabbah, because he would say you're potter there. Rather, that was davka Reb Ami. Amar le Ravina, the Rav Ashi says Ravina to Rav Ashi. Nimtzis harishona Chusha b'vnei me'ayin mao. So Ravina asks Rav Ashi an interesting question. What if on the outside, both animals look gishmak? They look plump, they look shmeinivdik. Both of them look great on the outside, and he nonetheless slaughters both of them, which he should not be doing. He only needs to slaughter one korbin chatas. But he slaughtered both of them, and on the outside, they both looked great. Now, it turns out, right, nimtzes harishona kchusa b'vnei me'ayin mao. Once they cut them open, turns out that the first one was really shvach, just that, for whatever reason, its gut was very big. But in terms of the animal itself, it actually was not a very healthy animal. It was a very thin animal. So now, basum achshavto azlinon. So do we say, well, it goes based on intention? And from the outside, they both looked healthy, and clearly his intention was to slaughter both of them. Again, if it was mamish bizadon, said he would not be chayav korban chatzis, be chayav kars. It's talking about kilu. He intended to slaughter both of them for whatever reason. He didn't realize it was also or whatever it is. But he did intend to slaughter both of them. They were both healthy looking from the outside. So v'gavel isuru kamichavit is kavana was an osur kavana, even if he didn't realize it. Right, even if you didn't realize it was also, but he did intend to slaughter both of them, and that's not allowed. Oh, dilma basar ma'isa vazlinon, or do we say that it goes based, results? At the end of the day, his actions led to just one ideal animal being slaughtered because the other one was not ideal. The other one ended up being shvach, even though he didn't know that at the time that he slaughtered it. From the outside, it looked fine, but in the end, one of them was shvach, and therefore, he slaughtered one good one shvach one. He should not be chayav a korbin chatas. So ha-omer lei, so Rav Ashi says, lab hainu de Rabba v'Rava. Is this not like Rabba and Rava jointly say on this topic, the itmar that it was stated, shama shetova tinok bayom. A person hears that a baby has drowned in the sea. Now he says, okay, and he just goes ahead with what he wanted to do anyways. Ufaris mitzuda lahalos dogim. And he says, okay, and he takes his net and he spreads it out in the water to go fishing on Shabbos, and he pulls up fish. Ve'ela dogim chayev. So he's going to be chayev. Let's assume it was by accident on Shabbos. For whatever reason, he didn't realize it wasn't allowed, whatever it is. But he's going to be chayev to bring a korbin chatas, because his intention was to go fishing, and that's what he did. Lahalos dogim ve'ele dogim v'tinok. Now, what if, when he spread out his fish to go, his net to go fishing, he pulled up, in addition to fish, he pulled up this baby that had drowned in there as well. Rava Amar Chayiv. Rava says that he's Chayiv. The Rabba Amar Potter. So Rava says Chayiv, since his intention was only for the fish and not for this baby. So therefore, he is chayev. However, Rabba says potter. Rabba says potter. Now, however, Vad Khan, Rabba lo potter, ela kevin de shama, amina nami daite atino. Aval lo shama lo. The thing is, though, even Rabba, who says potter in this case, right, where he spread out the fish, you spread out the net for the fish, is on the surface of it, his intention was not to try and pull up this baby. He spread out the net for the fish, but he ended up pulling up the baby. The thing is, as we pointed out at the beginning of the brisa, he had known already at the time that there was a baby that had drowned in the water. Meaning that was not his intention when he had spread out the net. He had spread out the net in order to catch fish. But nonetheless, he was aware that there was a baby in there, and when he spread out his net to catch fish, he pulled up the baby. So therefore, Rabba will say, look, we could argue that his intention was to pull up the baby as well, therefore he's potter. However, in the case of these two sheep that were slaughtered, and on the outside they both looked healthy, and he slaughtered both of them nonetheless, and then after the fact, one of them turns out to be shvach, even Rabba would say that he'd be chayiv there because his intention was clearly to slaughter both animals. This is not like where somebody said there's a baby in the river and you could argue that his intention was for the baby, at least subconsciously, whatever it is. But here, I mean, there's no other intention, and both Rabbah and Rava would say that you're chayiv. V'ikadam is those who say not that Rabbah would agree that you're chayiv, but rather elahainu plugtayu de Rabbah v'Rava. Rather, this is the machlokas between Rabbah and Rava. The itmar shoma shetova tinok bayom, that if he heard that a baby drowned in the sea forest, mitsuda la'alos dogim, and he spread out his net to catch fish, behela dogim, and he pulled up fish, chayiv, la'alos dogim, behela dogim, tinok v'dogim. But if when he pulled up his net, there was fish and a baby, Rabba Omar Potter, Rabba says that he is Potter, Rabba Omar chayiv, and Rava says chayiv. How come? Rabba Omar Potter says Rabba Potter zilbasar maisav, Rava Omar zilbasar machshavto. That Rabba is saying that he's Potter not based on his intention, but rather based on the net result. But what's that called? No pun intended. That the net result, that look, at the end of the day, regardless of what his intention was, he pulled up the baby, therefore he is Potter. And Rava says yes, but his intention was not to pull up the baby, it was to pull up fish, therefore he is chayiv. Applying that to our case of the two sheep that on the outside both looked healthy, but only after the fact one of them turned out to be shvach. So Rava would say it goes by the net result and he would be Potter, and Rava would say we go based on the intention and he would be chayiv. Now we have a little Gemara here about getting stuff for a sick person on Shabbos. Amar Rabba says Rabba, choleh shamdu legrogris achas. If you have a sick person, my impression, it doesn't say anything here, my impression is that we're talking about a choleh sheyesh bo sakana, a sick person that is in mortal danger. Shamdu legrogris achas, and they said, look, if this fellow can get a dried fig, he will be saved. At least, we'll keep him alive at the very least. Viratzu asar bnei adam, and there were 10 people there, and they all ran in 10 different directions to see whoever can get a dried fig as quickly as possible to try and save their friend. Vivu asar grogris bivasachats, and sure enough, everyone came back with another fig. All he needed was one fig. 10 people brought figs. Pturin, all of them are pturin because they all had the right intention, right? What does Rashi say? Pturim de hazar is l'chol meshubach. Somebody who is zariz, who's fast, who's on the move, who's helpful for a sick person, that is meshubach, that is great. And the Shulchan Aruch says something about getting like a lot of schar for it. It's a very good thing to do. Afilu baza achaza, even if they came back one after the other, va'afilu kodem v'hivri barishona, even if he was already, by the time the first person came back and gave him that fig, he was good, and then people keep on coming in with more figs. Everyone is potter since their intention was in the right place. Ba'i Rava asks, Cholish amdu lishtei grogris. What if the need of this choleh was for 2 dried figs? V'yesh shnei grogris b'shtei uktzin, and there were 2 figs. I don't know, dried figs, fresh figs. I don't know. We're talking about, I imagine, plucking them off of a tree, right? So we needed 2, right? So this choleh needs 2 figs. Now we get to the tree and we see we have 2 options. Let's go right for a second. V'shalosh ba'oketz echad. You see, there are 3 figs coming out of 1 stem on the tree. I.e., we can do 1 maise of, I guess, toleh or kotzer, whatever, or what's another, botzer. Basically, right? We can right there. You have 3 figs connected by 1 stem, and you can remove 1 stem, which is 1 melachah on Shabbos. Remove 1 stem and get 3 figs. The thing is, all this choleh needs is 2 figs. So you're getting more than he needs. Alternatively, there are 2 figs there, but each one has its own stem, which you're going to have to do 2 melachas in order to remove them, 1 per each fig. It's an interesting question. All he needs is 2 figs. So if you do the 1 melacha and take the 3 figs, well, then you're doing 1 melacha, but you're getting the choleh more than he needs, and it's Shabbos. We only have a heter for what he needs, not more than that. At the same time, by getting him only what he needs and no more, you're actually going to have to do an extra melacha on Shabbos. So, Heiminayu Maisinon, what do we do? Shtayim maisinan dechazule. Do we get him the 2 figs because that's what he needs? Or dilma shalosh maisinan dikamimaite ktsira. Or do we say to prefer to get the 3 figs since there's less melachah, less harvesting? Pshita shalosh maisinan. Of course, the answer is to get the 3 figs that require less harvesting. That kando kamar bishmal hasam, because when Rabbi Shmuel says by the 3 sa'ah of barley versus the 5 sa'ah of barley, that's because because by harvesting 3 sa'ah of barley versus 5 sa'ah of barley, you are doing less melachah, you're doing less harvesting. But here, by getting less figs, mafsha kitzira, you're doing more melachah, you're doing more harvesting. Certainly bring more for less melacha. Certainly bring the 3. The Shulchan Aruch says something interesting though, which is that if there were 2 figs attached by 1 stem and 3 figs attached by 1 stem, so now it's an interesting question. Either way, it's 1 melacha. I could pluck off the 2 fig stem, or I could pluck off the 3 fig stem. The Shulchan Aruch says in that case you should pluck off the 2 fig stem, because even though it's the same amount of melacha, you're only really allowed to do just the amount, only prepare for the needs of the choleh. And the Mishnah Berurah says that there are other nafka minas as well. So let's say bishul, right? Let's say you need to heat up some soup for this choleh. I don't know. This is just how I'm understanding it, but I think it's interesting halacha. Let's say there's a choleh sheish bo sakan and you have to heat up some soup. So maybe you say, oh, you know what? In the freezer, there's 3 containers of soup. All he needs is 1 container of soup. I can heat up 1 container of soup. That would be enough for him, right? But if I'm anyways cooking on Shabbis, let me put in 3 containers of soup. No, we say that when it comes to a situation like this, you do, all things considered, like we've been talking about, you do just what is necessary for the choleh. And therefore, if there's 2 figs on a stem and 3 figs on a stem, prefer the stem with the 2 figs, since that is what he needs, even though it's the same melacha to take the 2 or to take the 3. If all he needs is 2, just get the 2. Now we get up to a new Mishnah, already the 2nd Mishnah in the 6th parak of Masechta Menachos, and the 3rd and final topic on today's daf: where to bring the ha-omer barley from. Says the Mishnah, mitzvahs ha-omer lavi min ha-karov. Bring the barley from as close to Yerushalayim as possible. Lo biker ha-karov liYerushalayim. V'vinosu mikol makom. Look, if the barley that's closest to Yerushalayim is not yet ripe, is not yet ready, but there's barley elsewhere that is ready, so bring that other barley wherever you have to get it from. There, after all, once it happened that the ha-omer, the barley for the ha-omer, was brought from as far away as Gagos Tzrifin, and the shtei alechem, the wheat for the shtei alechem, was brought from as far away a boondock as Bikas Ein Socher. Says the Gemara, my taima, how come we want to prioritize, give preference to closer barley? 2 answers. Ibai Seima Mishum Carmel. The pasuk says by the ha-omer, it says, I'm reading, and I quote, Vim takriv minchas bikurim l'Hashem oviv kalui ba'esh geres Carmel takriv es minchas bikurecha. Carmel stands for rach. Kar is like rach, and mal is like squishy, and therefore you want it to be soft and squishy. And from as close to the Beis Hamikdash as possible, you can get the softest, squishiest barley. But if it has to travel from as far out a boondock as Gagos Tzrifin, by the time it gets to Yerushalayim, it may no longer be soft and squishy. Alternatively, mishum de'ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs, because we don't pass over mitzvahs. If we have the possibility of using the barley that's closer to Yerushalayim, we're not going to pass by and wave as we pass by to the barley while we go to get barley from some other place. We don't pass over our mitzvahs. Tosfos has a very interesting question, friends. Tosfos says that we've learned before about, for example, by the chatos apnimios, we had said that the shiyarei adam of the chatos apnimios are poured on the yesod of the mizbech ha-ma'aravi, on the western yesod. And we learned that out from a pasuk. Tosfos asked a very interesting question. Why do we need to learn that out from a pasuk? We learned out from a pasuk. It says lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, that it has to be the side of the mizbech that's closest to Hashem, and that's the western side of the mizbech. But why do we need a pasuk? Anyways, of course we should only be pouring it on the yesod, the western yesod of the mizbech, because that's the closest to Hashem. Of course, why would we pass that side of the mitzvah of the mizbech to go to some other side of the mizbech which is further away? What about ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs? Of course I know that. I don't need a pasuk. Tosfos gives a very interesting answer about what ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs is. Ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs means we give priority to the closer one. That if it's between two mitzvahs and we're going to have to pass over one to get to the other, ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs, right? If we have the possibility of bringing the Omer from closer to Yerushalayim or further from Yerushalayim, prefer the one that's closer, because that way we don't have to pass over it. It's a matter of priority. Also, Tosfos mentions that, for example, we would clean out the ashes, I believe, from the Mizbach HaKetores before the menorah, because the Mizbach HaKetores was closer, right? The Mizbech, right? Okay. Dishum Mizbech HaPnimi VeHaMenorah. I mean, Dishum Mizbech Kodem Mishum Dei Ma'avirin. Right. That when you walk into the Heichal, you get to the Mizbech first, so you should clean out the ashes of the Mizbech, Mizbech HaKetores, before you clean out the ashes of the menorah, because, which one should you do first? Well, don't pass by the Mizbech HaKetores in order to do the menorah first. If you're going to pass by the Mizbech HaKetores, do that first. So it's about priority. Now, in terms of, if you ask me what's the halacha about where I should be pouring the shiyarei adam of the chatos apnimis, ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs is not going to determine, it's not going to say that, it's not going to determine that the halacha is that you're going to do on this side, because to learn out halacha, we need to learn out halacha from psukim. Once ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs can be used to prioritize halachas that we already know. It's not going to be used to be koveya, to determine a halacha based on ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs. It doesn't work like that. Rather, it's a way to kind of prioritize in order of mitzvahs, which is very interesting. So in terms of understanding the concept of ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs, ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs is a way for us to give preference to one possibility of doing a mitzvah over another possibility of doing a mitzvah. Tana Rabbana, the rabbis taught, Kishatzaru malchi beis chashmonoi ze al ze. Now, the chashmonoim from Hanukkah fame, so unfortunately, there was some strife down the line among the heirs who wanted to be king, and this was between Aristobulus and Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus and Aristobulus were fighting. They both said, Ana Emloch, they both said, I want to be the king. So then, Hyrcanus then laid siege of Yerushalayim, and Aristobulus was inside. He was trapped inside Yerushalayim, and Hyrcanus was laying siege around Aristobulus. But nonetheless, even though they were fighting and they laid siege around Jerusalem, that didn't stop the fact that the korbin tamid had to be offered every single day. The Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash was still standing, and Lemaisa, the korbin tamid had to be offered every day. Now, the korbin tamid, of course, was purchased with the money from the Trumas Halishka. The Trumas Halishka was in the Beis Hamikdash, and of course, the korbin had to be offered in the Beis Hamikdash. So they would send out b'chol yom v'yom every day. Hayu mishalshin loin dinar bikupa every day, even though they were fighting with each other. Some money would go over the wall of Yerushalayim. That would come from the Trumas Halishka, and on the outside they would receive the money. They would go buy a sheep and send the sheep over the wall. And a sheep would come back on the other side of the wall in exchange. And even though they were fighting, they still had a system to ensure that the korbin tamid was offered every day. Now there was one, seems like probably a shmendrik, shahaya maki b'chochma yavanis. There was a shmendrik, there was a zakin echad who was in Yerushalayim, inside. He was trapped inside with Aristobulus, but I guess maybe he was a traitor or something. But with Hyrcanus on the outside were the Romans. And this fellow, this traitor from the inside, so he signaled Chochmas Yavanis to some kind of signaling, some kind of fancy signaling, and he fancily signaled to them, La'az lo'em b'chochma Yavanis, and he said to the Romans, Amalen kozmancha asukim ba'avoda, look, Mr. Roman, so long as the Yidden are offering the korbin tamid, ein nimsarim b'yedchem, you're wasting your time in the siege. Lemachar shilshul aloyin dinarin b'kupa, and then, sure enough, it happened immediately. The next day, the money came over the wall from inside Yerushalayim to the outside. And in exchange, instead of sheep coming up the wall in return, chazir, a hog, was hoisted up the wall. And once the hog reached half of the wall, it jammed its nails into the wall as it was going up. Eretz Yisrael, Arba Meus Parsa, Arba Meus Parsa, and Eretz Yisrael shuddered 400 parsos by 400 parsos. Both Shah at that time, Amr, they said, Arur Shegadol Chazer, cursed is one who raises a hog, V'Arur Sheyilmad Beno Chachma, Shelamid Beno Chachma Yavanis, and cursed is a fellow who teaches his yingle the wisdom of the Greeks, the Chachmas Yavanis, this signaling of sorts that created a mess. Val Osa Shah, right, caused the Talmud Shell, caused the Korbin Talmud to stop being offered. Val Osa Shah Shaninu, and it was at that time that they taught that Maisa Shabbat Omer Migagos Tufim V'Shtei Alechem Mibigas Ein Socher. It was during that time during that terrible time between infighting between the Malchus Beis Chashmonai and the Romans getting involved. And Rashi says that the Romans, right, whether it was the Romans or Aristobulus, whoever it was, they destroyed everything around Yerushalayim. So there was no barley for the ha-omer close to Yerushalayim. There was no wheat for the Shtei Alechem close to Yerushalayim. So that is when they had to, that was the time that they had to bring the barley from Gagos Tufin and the wheat from Bikas Ein Socher. Kimato Omer, when it came time to offer the barley for the korbin ha-omer, lo ave yade mehecha aisi omer. They didn't know, where are we going to bring barley for the korbin ha-omer. Achrazu, so they announced, also charsha, a certain fellow. Interesting, so chorish is usually deaf. Here it means actually mute. He could hear, he heard the announcement, but he was mute. So I was thinking it should say ilim. Interestingly, Tosfos points out that this story actually in the Yerushalmi is actually excuse me 1 second. Tosfos points out that this story is actually in the Yerushalmi. Over here it says it was Ba'osa Shah. It was Alosa Shah. That was at that time that they brought the barley from Gagos Tufin and the wheat from Ein Socher. Tosfos points out that actually in the Yerushalmi they have this story a little bit differently with Gagos Tufin and the Ein Socher, Bikas Ein Socher, and over there, actually it does say that it was an Elam. It does say that it was a mute rather than a deaf person. So anyway, so this mute came. So Osif Chada Yoda Aigra, and he put one hand on a roof, V'chada Yoda Srifa, and one on a little hut. Amalu Mordechai. So Mordechai said, who's Mordechai? Rashi says Mordechai is Mordechai. Mordechai ben Yair ben what is it? Ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kishi Shimini? Was that his name? I don't know, I should know this. Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish Ish Yemini. I think I said that right. Says Rashi, that's who it was. Tosfos says, how could that be? How could that be? How could that be that was, it was way later. I mean, Mordechai lived between the first and second temples. This was a few hundred years into the second temple. So Tosfos says that actually, so we're going to see soon in a few lines of the Mishnah in Shkolim, right? That there was somebody named Mordechai who was in charge. Whatever, we'll get there soon. Basically, the Mordechai was an important person in the Beis Hamikdash, or a certain official in the Beis Hamikdash, and basically anybody who had that official position would be called Mordechai. So this is Lav Davka, the Mordechai from. So the Machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says it is Mordechai from the book of Esther. Tosfos says it's somebody else who had an official position, perhaps the official position that was once held by Mordechai, but whoever had that position they would call him Mordechai. Anyways, Mi'ika duchta dishma gagos tzrifin o tzrifin gagos. So Mordechai, in response to this mute pointing to roofs, to gagos and to tzrifin, he says, "Is there a place called gagos tzrifin and a tzrifin gagos bodku v'ashkechua?" And they searched, and sure enough, there was a place called gagos tzrifin, and there was barley there, and they brought the ha-omer from that barley. Now came Shavuos, and once again they were faced with the problem: where are we going to find wheat? They didn't know where to bring wheat from. Again, they said, what do we do? They announced, who knows where to get wheat? And once again, that mute person came. He put one hand on his eyes, and one hand he pointed to it's like the thing in the door where the what does Rashi say? I was imagining actually, whatever. All doors, I guess, have something that something goes into. So it's the thing that the thing goes into. That he pointed to it on a door. Mordechai. So Mordechai says to the people, "Miika duchta dishma ein socher o socher ayin badku va'ashkechu," and they found ein socher, and that is where they brought and there was wheat there, and they brought the shtei lechem from that wheat. Another incident where Mordechai knew how to decipher decipher a situation when it came to halacha. Hanu shalosh noshim, there were 3 women, the aisu shalosh kinin, and these 3 women were bringing 3 nests of birds. Every nest, we've interacted with Masechta Kinim before. It was a very intense day in Masechta Zvachim. We learned some Masechta Kinim. That was fun times. Anyways, there were these 3 women who had to bring 3 nests. Each nest had to bring as 2 birds. So each of these 3 women respectively had to bring 2 birds as korbanos. Chada amra lizivasi, v'chada amra liyamosi, v'chada amra leonasi. One of them said, I need to bring 2 birds lizivasi. One of them says, I need to bring 2 birds liyamasi. And the third one says, I need to bring 2 birds leonasi. Savamina. So the people who heard this, they figured zivasi zava mamish, that zivasi means that she's a zava, and a zava brings 1 chatas and 1 ola. Liyamasi mamish. Yamasi means, let's say it also means a zava, that dam was flowing like water, like the sea. Also a zava. The onasa mamish. Also, let's assume that that's a zava as well. Dechulu chada chatas v'chada ola. Basically, the point is, they thought to say that, okay, these 3 women were zavas. They each had to bring a nest that contained 1 bird that would be a chatas and 1 bird that would be an ola. Omar lehu Mordechai, but Mordechai says to them, wait a second. Shema bezov sikana. No, maybe it means that she was releasing so much blood that she was actually in sakana, she was in danger. And she's saying that she's going to bring 2 birds as olas, as donations. Not because she's no longer a zava, but as a donation to the Beis Hamikdash. Shema bayom sikana. Maybe she was endangered bayom, in the sea. Shema be'ena sikana. Maybe she had some kind of dangerous predicament with her eye. Dechulu olos ninu. If that's the case, that they're bringing nests as donations, those are ola donations. 2 olas, not a chatas and an ola. Baduk ve'ashkach. They checked, and sure enough, it was as Mordechai intuited to suggest. And this is like we learn in the Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the 5th parak of Masechta Shkolim. Psachya ala kinin, that Psachya was in charge of the kinin, but also, does it say anything? Okay, on the nests. Basically, there were 13 pushkas basically on Har HaBayis, and Psachya was in charge of the 2 pushkas that would be for buying birds for korbanos. So if a person needed, so for example, a yoledes, a woman who gives birth, at the end of either 40 or 80 days, she comes and she brings, well, maybe let's not say yoledes. For now, it's a little bit more complicated. Let's say a zava. Okay, Azava, when she's no longer Azava, she comes to Yerushalayim and she has to bring one bird as a chatas, one bird as an olah. So what she does is she takes some money, she puts it in the pushka, and they empty out the pushka, and they use the money that was placed in there, and they buy the birds, and they offer them on behalf of, so you basically put some money in the pushka, and you're done, and you can know that birds will be offered for you. So Mordechai was in charge of the bird pushkas. Mordechai, so fine. And Psachia is Mordechai. Psachia is Mordechai. Lamanika Shmo Psachia. Why was Mordechai's name Psachia? Shaposeach Devarim Vidorshan, that he would open up things and he would expound them. And he knew 70 languages. That's why he was called Psachia. Kulu Sanhedrin Nami Yodei Shivim Lashon. Didn't the entire Sanhedrin know 70 languages? The Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Mashivim b'Sanhedrin, we don't install in the Sanhedrin Ela Baile Chochma. People are very wise. Baile Mara, very beautiful, very attractive. Baile Koma, very big and imposing. Baile Zikna, very old. Baile Kshofim, they know magic. Rashi says so that if they need to kill somebody and he does a spell so that you can't kill him, well then the judges can do their own spells and kill him. Tosfos says that they need to know magic because, let's say, somebody is a Yechayev, I think, skila for being a machshefa. So they have to know magic. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that they have to actually do magic, not just a sleight of hand, right? So they have to know magic in order to be able to determine what's magic. And they know 70 languages, so that they can actually understand directly from the testimony themselves. They don't need a translator. Ella, they have a bayil lishne v'darish v'aynu b'Mordechai bilshon. Yes, what was unique about Mordechai was that he had a very broad range of knowledge, that he was able to connect different things in order to come to a conclusion and mix together different languages and sources in order to come to the right conclusions. And that's what the pasuk says in Sefer Nehemiah, that he was called Mordechai Bilshon, that Bolel, that he would mix together different languages in order to figure and decipher things. Friends, that was the Samech Dalid of Masechta Menachos. Wow, that turned out to be, I think, a long daf, not a particularly difficult daf, an interesting daf, but a long daf. Friends, on Daf Samech Dalid of Masechta Menachos, we began the 6th parak of Masechta Menachos that talks about the korbin ha-omer. We discussed harvesting barley for the korbin ha-omer. Rabbi Shmuel says that during the weekday, 5 sa'as of barley. On Shabbis, only 3 sa of barley. The rabbis say always 3 sa of barley on Shabbos during the week. Rabbi Chanina Skana says on a weekday, the barley is harvested with 3 people, 3 sickles, and 3 baskets. And on Shabbos, 1 person, 1 sickle, and 1 basket. The Chacham say it's always 3 people, 3 sickles, and 3 baskets. We then had a whole bunch of scenarios where we tried to say maybe Rabbi Shmuel holds like some other Tana, but we kept on saying that they were that the different Tanaim were unique. We discussed doing melachah for a choleh on Shabbos, which is interesting. We said even if 10 people run to do the melachah, it's okay because everybody is doing it to be helpful and with the right intention to save this person. We say to prioritize 3 figs that come from 1 stem over 2 figs that require you to pluck 2 stems and do melachah twice, even if only 2 are needed. Still, if you could minimize the melachah by plucking the stem with 3 figs, prefer that over 2 pluckings to get the perfect number. However, prioritize 2 figs with 1 stem over 3 figs with 1 stem when only 2 are needed, even though it's the same melachah. Still, you should really only be getting that which is needed for the choleh. And finally, where to bring the ha-omer barley from? The answer is as close as possible to Jerusalem, either so that it's soft and squishy, or to avoid passing over mitzvahs, in mavirin al mitzvahs, which he said means basically that we want to prioritize whichever is closer, and you can technically, however, bring it from further if necessary. Friends, that was Daf Samech Dalid of Masechta Menachos. Hope you have a great day. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.